Dear students, do you have grandparents? If so, do you spend a lot of time with them? Yes, grandparents are really a wonderful gift from God. Grandparents, individually known as grandmother or grandfather, are the parents of a person's father or mother, which means parents' parents are known as grandparents. Your mother's parents or your father's parents, that is maternal or paternal. Your mother's parents are known as maternal grandparents and your father's parents are known as paternal grandparents. In today's class we will understand first part of the prose, The Portrait of a Lady, written by Khushwant Singh. The Portrait of a Lady. What is the meaning of the word portrait? The word portrait has two different meanings. One is a painting, drawing, picture or a sketch of a person, especially one depicting only the face or head and shoulders. And the other meaning is a format of a printed matter. That is, when you take a printout, you take it in a portrait form or in a landscape form. But here, in the story The Portrait of a Lady, the word portrait is the picture of the life of the grandmother of the writer Khushwant Singh. The portrait means the picture of the life of the grandmother. Whose grandmother? The writer Khushwant Singh's grandmother. Let us know about the writer Khushwant Singh. Khushwant Singh is an Indian writer in English. He was born on 2nd February 1914. He is a prominent Indian novelist and journalist. Singh's weekly column, with malice towards one and all, carried by several Indian newspapers, is among the most widely read columns in the country. Singh is best known for his penchant for secularism, his humor, and an abiding love of poetry. He is the recipient of the Padma Bhushan in 1974 and Padma Vibhushan in 2007. He was one of the editors of the famed Illustrated Weekly of India. His works include A History of the Sikhs, Train to Pakistan, Delhi, etc. Let us begin the lesson, The Portrait of a Lady. Please open your textbook, students. Page number 69. My grandmother, like everybody's grandmother, was an old woman. She had been old and wrinkled for the 20 years that I had known her. People said that she had once been young and pretty and even had a husband, but that was hard to believe. My grandfather's portrait hung above the mantelpiece in the drawing room. He wore a big turban and loose-fitting clothes. His long white beard covered the best part of his chest and he looked at least 100 years old. He did not look the sort of person who would have a wife or children. He looked as if he could only have lots and lots of grandchildren. As for my grandmother being young and pretty, the thought was almost revolting. She often told us of the games she used to play as a child. That seemed quite absurd and undignified on her part, and we treated it like the fables of the prophets she used to tell us. She had always been short and fat and slightly bent. Her face was a crisscross of wrinkles running from everywhere to everywhere. No, we were certain she had always been as we had known her. Old, so terribly old that she could not have grown older and had stayed at the same age for 20 years. She could never have been pretty, but she was always beautiful. She hobbled about the house in spotless white with one hand resting on her waist to balance her stoop and the other telling the beads of her rosary. Her silver locks were scattered untidily over her pale, puckered face, and her lips constantly moved in inaudible prayer. Yes, she was beautiful. She was like the landscape in the mountains, an expanse of pure white, serenity breathing peace and contentment. Please locate meanings of new words. Portrait, photograph. Mantelpiece, a shelf above a fireplace, usually part of a frame that surrounds the fireplace. Turban, a head covering for a man made from a long piece of cloth that is wrapped around the top of the head. Revolting, extremely unpleasant. Absurd, stupid or silly in a humorous way. Prophet, a person who is believed to have a special power. Criss-cross of wrinkles is a mark with or consists of a pattern of crossed lines. Wrinkle is a small line in the skin caused by old age. Hobbled, walk in an awkward way, typically because of pain from injury. Stoop, to bend the top half of the body forward and down. Silver lock is the term used for the grandmother's grey hair when the author was describing her beauty. Inaudible, unable to be heard. Puckered, tightly gathered or contracted into wrinkles or small folds. Serenity, the state of being calm, peaceful and untroubled. Moving on to the explanation. The author Khushwant Singh says that his grandmother, like everybody's grandmother, was an old woman. The first stage of the author's relationship with his grandmother started when he was still a child. His grandmother had been old and wrinkled for the 20 years. Her face was so wrinkled that it was difficult to believe that she had ever been young and pretty. The writer's grandfather's portrait hung above the mantelpiece in the drawing room. He wore a big turban and loose-fitting clothes. He had a long white beard and he looked at least 100 years old. He appeared to have only lots and lots of grandchildren. The author had seen his grandmother for the last 20 years as the same old wrinkled woman. He couldn't imagine her in any younger condition. If anybody told him to imagine her as young, it was very difficult to imagine her as young and pretty. So, the author says that the thought itself was revolting. In the second paragraph, the author describes his grandmother as very old woman, short and fat, slightly bent, wrinkled face and with grey hair. She hobbled about the house with one hand resting on her waist to balance her stoop. Prayer was the part of the life of the grandmother. All the time she had the rosary in her hand, her fingers kept rolling the beads and her lips kept muttering prayers. The author also says his grandmother was beautiful like the landscape in the mountains. The author says that even though his grandmother was very old, she was very beautiful. Dear students, in today's class we have understood first part of the prose, The Portrait of a Lady, written by Khushwant Singh. Let me ask you a few questions to know how much you have understood. First one, how did the writer describe his grandmother? The writer's grandmother had always been short and fat and slightly bent. Her face was a criss-cross of wrinkles running from everywhere to everywhere. She could never have been pretty, but she was always beautiful. Second one, how did the writer describe his grandfather in the portrait? The writer's grandfather wore a big turban and loose-fitting clothes. His long white beard covered the best part of his chest, and he looked at least 100 years old. He did not look the sort of person who would have a wife or children. He looked as if he could only have lots and lots of grandchildren. Third one, what is the meaning of the word serenity? Yes, serenity means the state of being calm, peaceful and untroubled. Next one, choose the correct answer. First one, the author had known his grandfather for dash. Options are 10 years, 20 years, 5 years, 40 years. Yes, right answer. It's 20 years. Second one, in the portrait, the author's grandfather looked dash. Options 80 years old, 90 years old, at least 100 years old, 50 years old. Yes. C. At least 100 years old. I hope you all have answered correctly. Dear students, now I am going to end up this class. We'll meet in the next class. Bye for now. Thank you. Have a nice day.